G'day, Dr Shayne. My name, I don't know if we met before, but my name's Donna Ingram. I'm a Wiradjuri woman. I'm representing Murawin here today for the Hurstville Museum Galleries project. So to kick us off, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? What's your name and how are you connected to the Georges River?
Well, my name is Shayne Williams. I grew up at La Perez, and my connection here is that my father and his family, they grew up here. My father was born in Parrington's Women's Hospital on 13th of August 1922, and his sister was actually born here on the Georges River in a little house down at Ogilvy Street, when it was just cow paddocks at the time. So she was born 1923, and her name is Ellen Williams.
And how do you feel about this country? What memories or feelings come to mind?
Well, my family, were very active political spokespersons, for the Aboriginal struggle. My great uncle, that's my father's uncle, Joe Anderson, also known as King Burriga, was a well-known activist, and he used to often go to the Domain, to give political talks down there. And my father told me when he was young that his father, old Tom Williams, used to make artefacts, and my uncle as well. And they used to sell them down at the Domain while my uncle was giving public speeches. Also, we had relatives that lived here as well, like Uncle Jack Patton. So my father went to school with the 5 Patton children just up at Pico's public school. And there was a great number of Aboriginal people here at the time. You see, my father's grandmother, Ellen Anderson, purchased a big block of land in Ogilvy Street, Peakhurst, and so did her cousin, William Rowley, who had a big property right next to hers. And they allowed Aboriginal people to come from different parts of Sydney and also New South Wales, such as the Riverina, Wallaga Lake, Kempsey and Sackville on the Hawkesbury, to get away from all the management of the way Aboriginal people were being controlled on these reserves. So the Aboriginal Protection Board was quite harsh at the time, and our freedoms were being suppressed. However, my family had land. They bought it on the open market, so they held it in freehold, and that enabled them to turn those properties into a sanctuary for Aboriginal people who wanted to escape the suppression they was experiencing on these reserves.
It's really interesting. I went to the Lugano public and lived at Pecos for a while, and there wasn't so many Aboriginal people around that I knew about at the time, so that's really interesting to hear about. Thank you. So what does country mean to you? It's land, water and people.
Well, it's all about belonging, and the land is a part of us, it's inseparable. And my auntie, that's my father's sister, Ellen Williams, she told me that when her dad was young, it was just all cow paddocks here, and there's only one little bush track to school, but they used to spend a lot of their time down the river, just collecting oysters and bush cherries and witchetty grubs and just eating them. And I asked her once, I said, did you take anything home to your mother and father? And she said, oh yeah, we took the oysters and the cherries, but we didn't take the witchetty grubs home because we ate those. She reckoned that was better than the oysters and the cherries.
And what do you love about this area? What speaks to you most?
Oh, well, my family has a strong historical presence here. There was a lot of political activism, coming from, Saltpan Creek. And the activism was real too. It wasn't tokenistic, you know. And my great uncle, Joe Anderson, also known as King Burrigo, was filmed in 1933, given his political manifesto, on this river, which we call Tuggerah. So, my father, I'm sure, he remembers him, his uncle, and so does his sister, my auntie. And they remember him always sitting around a fire, talking about how they're going to lobby, the royal family, but also how to push back against the Aboriginal Protection Board, which was brutally, removing children on a systematic scale, from their parents. So the activism was ongoing, and it was real. And what they've left for us is a legacy. To keep on struggling against oppression, and to always stick up for our social rights at any level. You see, my uncle once spoke about having our own hospitals with their own nurses and so on, because Aboriginal people weren't allowed into hospitals. The only time Aboriginal people were allowed into hospitals was when the women were given birth. But that was actually a trap, because as soon as they gave birth to those children, the Protection Board would turn up and remove those children straight from the cribs. So, we had no rights whatsoever. I wasn't classified as a citizen myself until 1967. So I was born 1960. So you can only imagine, what it was like for our parents, and grandparents and great-grandparents living under this, apparatus of control, management, and and fear.
And can you tell us about any particular memories or stories that have been passed down through your community or through your family?
About this area? Well, my father used to always, bring me back this way for drives, and show me where they lived in Isaac Street. And also, my twin sisters, they're 14 years older than myself. He used to do the same with them as well. So he was always returning here, from La Perouse. From what I can gather, it was a very good place to live. A lot of Aboriginal people who lived, down at Salpan Creek, they had jobs. They were living free of, the management systems. And they all just appeared to be very happy, But my father's father, old Tom Williams, he served in the First World War with the Light Horse. He served in Palestine. And like many other soldiers over there, he got malaria. So when he returned and married, my father's mother, around about the time my father turned 13, so I'm talking about 1935, 36, the malaria killed him. It caused a heart attack. So, without a senior male in the family, they had no option then to, move to La Perouse to the reserve systems. Again, where we had a lot of cousins and that. So, my grandmother had to take my father and his sister away from here for their own safety, because, there wasn't a husband around anymore and the children didn't have a father. So that left them open to be removed from the Protection Board. They would find any excuse, to take the children. And, not having a senior male person in the family was, one of those excuses.
How did you feel going on those drives with your dad back to...
I felt like I was returning back to the country again, Yeah, it was, according to my father and a lot of other Aboriginal people that lived here, was a top-notch place to live, like me auntie, that's Dad's sister, used to tell me how her grandmother, so that's my great-grandmother, she used to sell gum tips and flowers around Cogra and Rockdale. She had her own clients, And they used to spend a lot of their time, collecting those flowers and gum tips and selling them. So they had their own little business going. And also, the marine life, was pretty good here. The oysters were, quite big and healthy in those days. There was a lot of fish, so you was never short of food. And we used to sell boomerangs as well. So my great uncle, he'd make his boomerangs, and my father's father would make his boomerangs, and my father Tommy, they used to go down to the domain and sell them down there on a regular basis. And my father do a little Aboriginal dance, to attract people in, so they was very business oriented, and we had no intention to become dependent on government whatsoever. My uncle even wanted to, sell wood as a business as well, firewood. But because we were there in numbers, that attracted the attention of the non-Aboriginal people who saw us as an eyesore, even though the land was ours, and made many attempts, to get rid of us. But it was difficult for them to do that because, like I said previously, the land was held in freehold title. There's even records of my great uncle, Hugh Anderson, come up here, to Hurstville Council and paying the rates. So they knew how to cope, they knew how to adapt to this Western way of life, they were, quite intelligent and political, and they knew what was required to be able to survive and even thrive in this new Western economy.
And I guess that sort of leads into the next question, about what you think people don't know or they get wrong about this area and its Aboriginal history and, the people that live here.
Yeah, I think what a lot of people get wrong is that they're not aware of what was here, and what Aboriginal people did to push back against, the Protection Board, and, people wanted us to, be removed from here. And also the political struggle as well, because I had another cousin who lived here, his name was Bert Groves. So he's my father's first cousin on his dad's father's side. So Dad's father and Bert's father, his name was Robert Groves. My grandfather was Thomas Williams. They was half brothers. They had the same mother. But he was responsible for setting up an organisation called for CATSI. It was an organisation that was open to membership by anybody, so there wasn't any discrimination or exclusion involved with that organisation. Unions had a lot to do with it as well, and one of the strongest branches of for CATSI was actually established here in this area, down at Salpan Creek.
So even I wasn't aware of that, so thank you. So how do you feel about the changes you've seen to this area over time?
Well, unfortunately, the properties we had, and that was quite sizable as well, are gone. I don't know exactly how they got lost. Maybe it occurred when my great-grandmother died. But according to me auntie and my father, it was all cow paddocks around here one time ago. There wasn't any houses like we see now. And their mother, my grandmother, used to always send them down to Mrs. Crittenden's dairy farm, with a billy can to get milk. So that's how rural this place was at one stage. I'm talking about the 1920s here and early 30s. So it's changed radically since that time. I've seen old aerial photos of the area, and it did look quite different. In fact, there's one little white house there, in the middle of nowhere, and my auntie looked at it and said, I was born in that house. So she was able to identify it because it was probably the only house in the area at the time,
Yeah,
And then she showed me this little track going through the bush. She said, "Oh, me and your father used to go to school that way, through this little track down there to towards Riverwood and upwards to the school." So yeah, it's changed radically, but you know, the history, all the Aboriginal history and my family's history, it hasn't gone anywhere. You know, people are just starting to realise over the last couple of years that there was a strong Aboriginal, you know, political presence here. A lot of activism, you know, came out of this area, but unfortunately, you know, people didn't realise that. You know, they thought most of the activism was coming out of places like Larparoos and Redfern. So this place has been sort of hidden in plain view, you know, for quite some time. Yeah, but it's good to, you know, see that you know, a lot of historians and local councils in particular are now becoming aware of, you know, the strength that, you know, my family had here, how active they were, and you know, there was a strong Aboriginal presence here, you know, not so long ago. I still feel there's a strong Aboriginal presence here. I feel like it's you know, disappeared altogether. I still feel it's strong here, and yeah, I feel equally strong, you know, when I come back, you know, to this area, and that's why I was so keen, you know, to get in front of this camera, you know, to talk about this area and share, you know, what I know about this area and what was taught to me, you know, by, you know, my father.
That's really great. Like I said, when I was, you know, living in the area, I didn't know a lot of that history. So, you know, thank you again. So what message would you like to share with visitors to the community, you know, those future generations that might come through the gallery? And
Oh, well, I'd like them to be aware of the history, you know, but the history in the fullest sense, you know, I still feel only a little bit's been told. And that, you know, there's a lot more work to do in that area. But yeah, just to realise, you know, that there was a very, very strong Aboriginal presence here. And in a physical sense, you know, it mightn't be like it was before, but certainly the history itself is still very strong here. And you know, I'd like to see, you know, more schools, you know, learn about that history, as well as visitors as well.
thank you. Well, that's the end of the questions, but maybe can you tell us about, sorry, I'll just turn this off. Can you tell us about growing up, you know, when you moved to Larparoos?
Well, I grew up in Larparoos.
Yeah, what was that like growing up in that community?
Oh, well, it was a reserve at the time. So I was born in Crown Street Women's Hospital. My father was born in Paddington Women's Hospital, 1922. My mother was born in Crown Street Women's Hospital in 1922. And my mother's mother was born at Larparoos on the beach in 1884. There used to be just little tin shacks there at the time. It wasn't a reserve or anything like that. It was an independent fishing community. But you know, we've got a strong history of fishing over there, so fishing is in our blood. If you have a look at all the deaths, births and marriages, you know, the occupation of a lot of the males in our family, they were fishermen. But the women were a big part of that as well. And all I ever did, you know, growing up was, you know, fishing and swimming and diving around, you know, Larparoos, you know, for lobsters, you know, which we call yanga, and abalone, which we call gurung, and all types of fish, you know, like flathead and whiting and bream. So yeah, we practically lived in the water, and it was no different to our parents, you know. The water was a big part of their life as well, particularly the ocean and my great-grandparents and so forth. But yeah, I grew up, you know, there was a lot of people still making artefacts at the time, like the older people, like my family did here, you know, made artefacts, but over there, you know, they're still very active doing that. And the girls and the ladies would, you know, do their shell work. I wasn't too familiar with that because it was seen as, you know, women business sort of thing. But I used to, you know, sit around watching the old fellas making their artefacts, and, you know, you'd be sitting there all day, and because they was, you know, very professional in how they did things, and they took their time. But every now and then they would tell you a little bit about what it was like when they was growing up, a bit of their history as well. So in a sense, living there was like a classroom, where you learn about your own history and from the older fellas, and you learn through trial and error as well. So when we were swimming, we used to go swimming with the older kids. Our parents wouldn't be anywhere near us, and the younger ones, would be taught by the older kids how to swim. And if you went under, they'd just grab you and pull you back up again, and then they'd throw you back in until you learned. So that's how we learned to swim, and from the older kids and older cousins actually. And we learn all about how to read the weather patterns and the tides, and know what fish were coming on the bite, at a certain time of the year and so on. So we became very immersed in the Botany Bay region, And my grandmother actually, she's the only grandmother I knew. So she was born 1884 and died when I was 19. So she was quite old. But I did have an opportunity to talk to her. And she used to tell me a little bit about what La Perouse was like when she was growing up in the early days. I'm talking about the 1880s and 90s and so forth.
Did anyone in your family work at the Chinese farmers markets?
You mean down at Matraville?
Yeah.
One of my brother-in-laws did when he was young fella, but no one directly in my family that I'm aware of.
Oh, okay, just curious. We heard a little bit about that. I'm just curious, that contact with that, with the farmers markets here at Matraville.
Well, there could have been Aboriginal people working there, but I'm only aware of my brother-in-law being there at one stage when he was a young fella, sort of just out of school.
Uncle Shayne, can you tell us about the work you do at the Burriga Foundation?
But I'll tell you about the Burriga Foundation first. Aaron Hughes, who couldn't be here with us this afternoon, he became very inspired by my great uncle, King Burriga, who gave his speech down on the Georges River. So I think it's probably the only recording of an Aboriginal person given a political manifesto like that in the country that I'm aware of. But he became very inspired by that, and he actually lived just down the road, a few doors down from where my great-grandmother's property was. So he decided to name an organisation after him and invited me to be a founding member. And the organisation is fundamentally philanthropic. So we have an expats program, so we support young Aboriginal students to get through to year 12 and through year 12. We create digital software as well, for community-based organisations. At the moment we developed a language platform, a digital platform, where that local communities can use to populate with their own language, to try and revitalise their language. We run cultural awareness programs as well. So the work we do is quite broad. And I in particular conduct professional development programs and cultural awareness programs for the organisation. And also, we do this sort of work as well. We do a lot of community engagement work, and what we're doing now is a classic example of the sort of work we get involved in, because we believe strongly in developing cultural resources and historical resources that could be used, to enlighten, schools and the wider community, about Aboriginal people and their struggles, and particularly our struggles here in this area.
And what do you do at the foundation? Do you deliver the sessions?
I do the coordination of the professional development programs, and also I conduct the teaching in those programs as well.